Hello everyone, have a beautiful day to all of you. I will be discussing the topic organization of psychological activities with the nature of behavioral changes under the human behavior in rural communities subject. Understanding human behavior is very important in society. The knowledge sheds light on patterns, the reasons why people make certain decisions. Of course, the more one understands about human behavior, the better they can position themselves and comprehend how others see, interpret, and adapt to their various environments. So human behavior is defined as the potential and expressed capacity of human individuals or groups to respond to internal and external stimuli throughout their life. In the realm of human behavior, cognition is a very prevalent theory which maintains that human behavior is determined by individual thoughts, inner judgment, personal motivations, and motivation is a process in which people between alternative behavior in order to achieve personal goal. It is also the result of an interaction between the person and the situation. It is not the personal trait. It's the process by which a person's efforts are energized, directed, and sustained towards attaining goal. So there are countless theories associated with human behavior and various types of conducts. Motivation works best when individual needs are compatible with organizational goals. People work to satisfy their needs. They work at their best when they are achieving the greatest satisfaction from their work. One of the theory for human motivation is the Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. So Maslow in 1943 stated that individuals must satisfy the lower level deficit needs before progressing to meet higher level growth of needs. However, he clarified later that satisfaction of a need is not an all or none phenomenon, admitting that his earlier statements may have given the false impression that a need must be satisfied 100% before the next need emerges. Maslow is a behavioral scientist and contemporary of Hertzberg's. Develop a theory about the rank and satisfaction of various human needs and how people pursue these needs. So these theories are widely cited in business literature, which is the Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. So this is the pyramid of needs. So we will have to start from physiological needs up to the self-actualization needs. So for physiological needs, it is the first level needs of an individual that we need to satisfy first. When we say physiological needs, it includes air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. So Maslow believed that these needs are the most basic and instinctive needs of an individual that we need to meet before we can consider or before we can have the other needs. So now we have the second level of needs is the safety needs, which includes the personal security, employment, resources, health, and of course, the property. So we have this one. For this, many organizations try to satisfy these needs by providing a desire for steady employment, health insurance, safe neighborhoods, and shelter from the environment. The third level of needs is the love and belonging, or the social needs, which includes friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. So for this one, this level of needs is concerned with the man's need for love, friendship, acceptance, attachments, and families help to fulfill this need for companionship and acceptance, as thus involvement in social, community, or religious groups. So in organizations, people tend to join different groups to satisfy their social needs. So by forming their groups and encouraging sufficient interaction among employees, manager can make sure that their subordinate social needs are satisfied. Then we have the next need is the STEAM needs. So this level of needs represents people's higher order of need. That is, man needs for self-respect and recognition by other. So the need for success, self-confidence, recognition, and appreciation of achievements are all examples of STEAM needs. It is this area in particular that managers can play a significant role in satisfying the needs of their employees. Namely, it can be done by rewarding higher achievements with recognition and, of course, appreciation. So for this one also, it includes freedom of an individual. Then we have the last need would be the self-actualization, or the desire to become the most that one can be. So the highest of the Maslow's hierarchy of need is the self-actualization. So this represents the apex of all men's needs. So self-actualization, people are self-aware, concerned with personal growth, less concerned with the opinions of others, and interested in fulfilling their potential. Maslow describes the self-actualization needs as follows. So, a musician must make a music, and at least must paint. A poet must write, if he is to be ultimately happy. The self-actualization need is the most difficult to address. In an organization context, a manager can help by impressing and challenging job to master so that they can in their work. So those are the pyramid of needs, from physiological to self-actualization. So take note, we have that physiological needs, the safety needs, love and belonging. We also have STEAM and also self-actualization. So another one is just an example of the Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. Then now let's proceed to the learning theories. So for the learning theories, it includes behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. So when we theory is defined as a set of concepts or statements with specification of how phenomena relate to each other. Also, theory provides an organizing description of a system that accounts for what is known and explains and predicts a phenomena. So learning theories, when we say behaviorism, new behaviors or changes in behaviors are acquired through associations between stimuli and response. For cognitivism, learning occurs through internal processing of information, while constructivism we construct our own knowledge of the world based on our individual experiences. So we have here the different types of behavioral learning. We have classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational conditioning. When I say classical conditioning, of course, it is learning through association, which is according to Ivan Pavlov. So when we say classical conditioning, a learning process that occurs when two stimuli are repeatedly paired. A response, which is first elicited by the second stimulus, is eventually elicited by the first stimulus alone. So we also have here operant conditioning by B.F. Skinner, or learning through consequences. Then we have observational learning, or learning through observation. So we have here an example of these three: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. So when we say operant conditioning, of course, sometimes it referred to as instrumental conditioning. So it is a method of learning that employs rewards and punishment for behavior. Through operant conditioning, an association is made between behavior and a consequence, whether negative or positive, for that behavior. So for example, in a class situation, if you wanted to increase the participation of the students, then you will have to provide rewards for those students who are doing good. But for those students who are doing bad, then you will have to provide punishment. So you will have to provide reward for a positive behavior and punishment for a negative behavior. So when we say conditional or observational learning, learning occurs through observations and imitations of others. So in the example, it is both the child is watching how or what are the things that their parents are doing. The ethics of behavioral change. The first one is the principle of well-being. The second is the principle of integrity. And the third one is the principle of empowerment. So when we say principle of well-being, it is if we're going to have a particular intervention or strategies implemented to different kinds of well-being, then we cannot expect that all forms of well-being to be equally pursued at all times. It means that if ever we're going to have an intervention or innovation in a community, we need to think what would be the best for many people. So we will have to consider the well-being of an individual before conducting an intervention. Then we have the second one is the principle of integrity. When we say principle of integrity, usually as an extension agent, when we conduct a community project or any development project, then make sure that as an extension agent, you will not deceive the people or manipulate them in ways that cause them to do behavior they do not want to do or removes their agency or free will. Which means that if there are information, you need to provide the positive and then the negative side of that intervention so that the people in the community will have to decide on their own whether that intervention is good for them or not. Then we have also the third one is the principle of empowerment. So in behavioral change, interventions should empower citizens to make democratic decisions about a certain practices. Interventions should strive to make the best scientific, political, economic, and moral arguments available to the public. To maximize the potential of interventions, it is also necessary to understand behavior and behavioral change. In other words, it is necessary to have a theoretical understanding of behavior change. So we have here the different behavioral change theories and techniques so that we can understand the behavior of the people in the community. We have the first one, the health belief model. The second one, the theory of planned behavior. Diffusion of innovation theory. The social cognitive theory. The Transtheoretical model or the stages of change. And then the social norms theory. Behavioral change theories and techniques is the health belief model. HBM was developed in the early 1950s by the social scientists at the United States Public Health Service in order to understand the failure of people to adopt disease prevention strategies or screening tests for the early detection of disease. Later, uses of HBM were for patients' responses to symptoms and compliance with medical treatments. So, HBM suggests that a person's belief in personal threat of an illness or disease, together with a person's belief in effectiveness of recommended health behavior or action, will predict the likelihood the person will adopt the behavior. As you can observe here in the figure, we have the individual perception, the modifying factors, and of course, the likelihood of action. So for the perceived susceptibility of the seriousness of the disease, it refers to a person's subjective perception of the risk of acquiring an illness or disease. So there is a wide variation in a person's feelings or personal's vulnerability to an illness or a disease. So for example, right now we have the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. Perceived susceptibility of the seriousness of the disease, that would be the perception of an individual. So is the individual susceptible enough of this coronavirus? So you will have to perceive. So as an individual, you will have to evaluate yourself. Now we also have the perceived severity. So this refers to person's feelings on the seriousness of contracting an illness. We also have the perceived benefits, perception of the effectiveness of various actions available to reduce the threat of an illness. Then for the barriers, of course, it is the perception of an individual to performing the recommended health actions. Then we have the cue to actions. This is the stimulus needed to trigger the decision-making process of an individual, whether to accept the health action or not. Then we have the self-efficacy. This refers to the level of a person's confidence in his or her ability to successfully perform behavior. We have limitations for this HBM or the health belief model. Of course, it does not account for persons' attitudes, beliefs, or other individual determinants that dictate persons' acceptance of a behavior. It assumes that everyone has access to equal amount of information on the illness or disease. Next, vision or the diffusion of innovation theory, we will have 5 categories of adopters: the innovators, the early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards. So when we say diffusion of innovation or the DOI, this theory was developed by Rogers in 1962, and it is considered as the oldest theory in social science. So it originated in communication to explain how over time an idea or product gains momentum and diffuses or spread through a specific population or social system. The end result of this diffusion is that people, as part of a social system, adopt a new idea, behavior, or product. Of course, when we say adoption, it means that a person does something differently than what they had previously. So we have here for innovators, it is consist of 2.5% of the population in the community. Usually, these individuals are those people who wanted to try the innovation first. So they are also called as the venturesome, and those individuals who are interested in new ideas. These people are risk takers. They will have to try first, develop ideas, and of course, they will have to appeal to the population. So innovators is 2.5%. Now we have the early adopters. Early adopters is 13.5% of the population. These individuals are the opinion leaders. So they enjoy leadership, embrace change opportunity, and of course, they are already aware of the need to change, and they are comfortable of adopting new ideas. The third one is the early majority, which is 34%. Well, these individuals are rarely leaders, but they adopt new ideas before the average person. So they typically need to see evidence that the innovation works. So they will have to see first, is the innovation really working? And of course, they need some testimonies from other people that this innovation is effective. While we have here, the next one is the late majority or the skeptical. And this individual, kumbaga ginatawag ni nato sila og mga in Bisaya, we have sigurista. Because these individuals will only adopt an innovation after it has been tried by the majority, and of course, it is already the evidence is already in the community that the intervention or innovation is effective. Then we have the last person to adopt for the categories of categories of adopters is the laggards, which consist of 16% of the population. These laggards, of course, those traditional individual, very conservative, and very skeptical of the change. Usually, these individuals or those people, moingon sa inyo nga, dong, day, nauna pa ko sa inyo sa duyan. So, these individuals are the hardest group to bring on board. So, usually, these people, they have peers, then pressure from people in the other adapter groups. So those are for the diffusion of innovation theory. Of an innovation, there are 5 main factors that influences the farmers or an individual whether to adopt or reject an innovation. So we have the relative advantage, whether the innovation that you are proposing in the community is better than the idea that they already have, the program, or the product that it replaces. So for example, is the innovation better in terms of technicality, in terms of income, and in terms of providing socio-cultural standing of the people in the community. Now we have compatibility. Is the innovation consistent with the values, experiences, and even the needs of the people in the community? For complexity, is the innovation simple to use? Is it difficult? Is it complex? Or it can be applied by the adopters or the individual directly with a minimal guidance from the extension agent. Now we have here number 4, trialability, the extent to which the innovation can be tested or experimented with before a commitment to adopt is made. So is there any experiment conducted in the area for that innovation? Is it can be tried in a limited basis, or it can be tried by the farmers in their own farm? So those are for the trialability. Then the last one is observability. For observability, it is the extent to which the innovation provides tangible result. Whether is it observable in the area? Is someone doing it? Is really the innovation providing income to the farmers? It really provides, it helps the people to buy what they need in the community. Cognitive theory. This theory started the social learning theory in the 1960s by Albert Bandura. It developed into the SCT or the social cognitive theory in 1986 and posits the learning occurs in social context with dynamic and reciprocal interaction of person, environment, and behavior. So the unique feature of the social cognitive theory is the emphasis on social interaction or social influence, on external and internal social reinforcement. So it considers that the unique way in which individuals acquire and maintain behavior, while also considering social environment in which individuals perform the behavior. So this theory takes into account the past experiences which factor into whether behavioral action will occur. So these experiences will influences the reinforcements, your expectation, and of course, this will shape whether a person will engage in a specific behavior and the many reasons why a person engage in that behavior. So for social cognitive theory, we have these 3 factors: the personal factors, the environmental factors, and the behavioral factors. Personal factors, which includes the individual's knowledge, your expectation, and of course, your attitude. While the environmental factors, it will have to include the social norms, the access in the community, and the influence on others, which is your ability to change your own environment. Then lastly, behavioral factors, which includes the skills, practice, and self-efficacy. All these three will have to interact and will determine the human behavior of an individual in the social cognitive theory according to Albert Bandura. Theory is the theory of planned behavior. So TPB predicts the individual's intention to engage in a behavior at a specific time and place. So we have here the attitude towards behavior, the subjective norm, and the perceived behavioral control will have the effect, or this will be the contributory to the behavioral intention of an individual. So this is another figure for the TPB. So we have behavioral beliefs, your attitude towards the behavior, your normative beliefs, subjective norm, your control beliefs, perceived behavioral control, and it's either all of this one will have to contribute to the intention and the actual behavioral control. Of course, when we say attitude, attitude refers to the degree to which a person has a favorable or unfavorable evaluation of the behavior of the interest. So TPB has the following limitation. It only assumes that the person has acquired opportunities and resources to be successful. It does not account for other variables that factor into behavioral intention. It also assumes that behavior is a result of linear decision-making process and does not consider that it can be changed over time. One is the Transtheoretical model, or the stages of change models. For these stages, we have 6 stages. So when we say the stages of a change model or the Transtheoretical model, it developed by Prohaska and De Clementi in the late 1970s. Evolved through studies examining the experiences of smokers who quit on their own with those requiring further treatment to understand why some people were capable of quitting on their own. So we have 6 stages. The first stage would be the pre-contemplation stage. So in this stage, the individual do not intend to take action in the foreseeable future. So not for this one, people are not yet considering change, or they are unwilling or unable to change. So the primary task of an extension agent or the people would be raising and awareness. Second stage would be contemplation. People are intending to start the healthy behavior in a perceivable nature. So this one, people already sees the possibility of change but is ambivalent and are uncertain. So they're not yet sure whether they can do it or not, the change for their behavior. So that's why we need to resolve the ambivalence and of course helping them to change. Number 3 is determination or the preparation. In this stage, people are ready to take the action within the next 30 days. So people or individuals already take small steps towards the behavioral change, and they believe that changing their behavior can lead to a healthier life. So the primary task would be to help identify appropriate changing or change strategies. Number 4 would be the action. For the action, this would include taking steps towards the change but hasn't stabilized in the process. People have already changed their behavior and intend to keep moving forward with that behavioral change. So in order to help an individual, we need to help implement change strategies and learn to eliminate potential relapses or potential problems. Number 5 would be maintenance. For the maintenance, an individual has achieved the goals and is working to maintain the change. So we need to sustain the change or the behavioral change. So how are we going to change this one? Of course, develop new skills for maintaining recovery. Then the last one would be determination or recurrence. So experience a recurrence of the symptoms. So how are we going to help them? So in order to cope with the consequences and determine what to do next. So that's why we need to do something so that the people will not go back to their behavior. So that's why that is the recurrence, or we need to identify strategies to help them achieve and continue doing the good behavior. So that is for the stages of change model and or the Transtheoretical model. Passing the behaviorism, now let's proceed to the cognitism. So what is cognitism? Cognitism is the psychology of learning, which emphasizes human cognition or intelligence as a special endowment enabling man to form hypotheses and develop intellectually, and is also known as cognitive development. So the underlying concepts of cognitism involves how we think and gain knowledge. When we say cognitism, it is also a learning theory which focuses on the processes which involve in learning rather than on the observed behavior. As opposed to behaviorists, cognitivists do not require an outward exhibition of learning, but focuses on the internal processes and connections that takes place during the learning. Cognitism principles have to do with optimizing the way adult learners are able to think about, understand, process, and also integrate new informations to put what they already know to a good use. The cognitive approach focuses on the mental activities of the learner that led up to the response and acknowledges the processes of mental planning, goal setting, and organizational strategy. Now we have here the constructivism. So what is constructivism? It is not really a totally new approach to learning. Like most other learning theories, constructivism has multiple roots in philosophical and psychological viewpoints of this century, specifically in the works of Piaget, Brunner, and of course, Goodman, the work of Piaget on the cognitive development. So the Piaget's theory of constructivism argues that people produce knowledge and form meaning based upon their own experiences. So for Piaget's theory, It covered learning theories, teaching methods, and education reform. So how are we going to change the educational system to best fit in the learning capacity of the individual? Accommodation, on the other hand, is the reframing the world and new experiences into the mental capacity that is already present in the individual. Now, let's discuss what is an attitude. We have done with the behavioral change. How about the attitude? Attitude is often used as an umbrella expression covering such concepts as preferences, your feelings, your emotions, beliefs, expectation, judgment, appraisal, values, your principles, opinions, and intentions. It is also an unobservable psychological construct which can manifest itself in relevant beliefs, feelings, and behavioral components. Another definition, according to Fascio and Williams, attitudes are summary of judgments of an object, event, which aid individuals in structuring their complex social environment. While, according to Eagly and Chaiken 1993, attitude is a psychological tendency that is expressed by evaluating a particular entity with some degree of favor or disfavor. When we say attitudes, of course, it includes evaluation, feelings, and action. For evaluation, that would be on your cognitive components, which includes your opinion or belief of an attitude. For affective component, it is your emotional aspects. So emotional or feeling segments of an attitudes, while behavioral, of course, an intention to behave in a certain way towards someone or something. That is the three components of attitude: evaluation, feelings, and attitude formation theories. Attitude formation theories help us understand how a person's attitude takes shape and why a person might have a particular attitude or how that attitude came to exist. So we have here the different theories for attitude formation. We have functionalist theory, learning theory, and of course the cognitive dissonance theory. When we say functionalist theory, these attitudes are formed according to how a particular person or thing meets our needs. The functionalist attitudes are shaped based on the personal benefit they offer. So this theory is according to Ivan Pavlov, which also has the classical conditioning or the operant conditioning that we have discussed earlier. Then we have the learning theory and also the cognitive dissonance theory. For this one, this is according to Leon Festinger. Cognitive dissonance refers to any incompatibility that an individual might perceive between two or more of his attitudes or between his behavior and attitudes. Festinger argued that any form of inconsistency is uncomfortable and that individuals will attempt to reduce the dissonance and hence the discomfort. Therefore, individuals will seek a stable state where there is a minimum of dissonance because an individual cannot completely avoid dissonance. So those are the attitude formation theories that we have: the functionalist theory, the learning theory, and the cognitive dissonance theory. So when we say attitude, of course, it is a social psychologist's most indispensable concept. And of course, it has components: affective, behavioral, and cognitive, with different essential theories according to beliefs, behavior, cognitive dissonance, theory of planned behavior, attitude behavior process model, and prototype willingness model. Then we have the next topic is the perception. So what is perception? So when we say perception, it is the study of how we form impressions of and make inferences about other people. So how are you going to, what are your impression of this individual? When we say Duterte, what is your impression? When we say Pia Wurtzbach, what is your impression? Catriona Gray, that is one example of perception. Now we have another definition of perception. It is to learn about other people. We rely on information from their physical appearance and verbal and non-verbal communication. So in our first impression, of course, we will have to look at the face, the body language, and how these people communicate with each other. Another definition would be the process through which we seek to know and understand other people. Then we also have, it is the social process by which we come to comprehend the behavior, the words, and actions of other people. So we have here different perceptual distortions. So what are those? We have stereotyping, the halo effect, selective perception, projection, and of course the contrast and effect. So stereotyping. Of course, it is the process of using a standardized impression of a group of people to influence our perception of a particular individual. Stereotypes are beliefs about social groups in terms of traits or characteristics that they are believed to share. So even before that individual can show you his or her true trait, then you already have your own stereotypes. When you say if people from Mindanao, then of course you have some individual stereotyping of a group of people. Next, halo effect occurs when one attribute of a person or situation is used to develop an overall impression of individual or situation. The influence of a global positive evaluation of a person on perceptions of their specific traits. Selective perception is the tendency to single out those aspects of a situation, person, or object that are consistent with one's needs, values, and attitudes. When we say selective perception also, it is a process of filtering out some messages and paying more attention to others. So you just wanted to focus on one thing. You will not have to focus on, kumbaga, the whole thing. You just wanted a particular situation. Here, projection. When you say projection, it is the assignment of one's own personal attributes to other individuals. Contrast or effect occurs when in-group and out-group members are compared on the same traits. For example, if members of an in-group perceive that their group possesses a trait, they are likely to perceive that out-group members do not. So this is according to Gawronski et al. 2005, or cited by Burdens, Horowitz 2008. So that would be all for our topic on the different theories of human behavior in rural communities. It is also included here the different learning theory. We have the functionalist theory, the different models in human behavior, the stages of human behavior changes. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure to study and read another information so that you can learn more about the subject.